Are you ready to be unmessable with? Well, you are in the right place. Welcome to Be Unmessable With, the podcast where you get the inspiration, strategy, and coaching to be unmessable with, no matter what life throws at you. And now, your host, Josselyne Herman-Saccio.
Hey there, welcome to Be Unmessable With the podcast. I am your host, Josselyne Herman-Saccio, and today our guest is Stephanie James. She is a seasoned psychotherapist and transformational coach. She's a dynamic speaker, a published author, a filmmaker, and an international podcast host. She powerfully delivers her message on all platforms in order to help people find their internal sparks, break through self-imposed limits, and create an empowered life full of passion and possibility. She's speaking my language. Her new film, When Sparks Ignite, which is playing on Humanity Stream, hosts a highly reputable cast of international thought leaders and change makers. Its compelling message is about how the challenges we face can actually become the match point that ignites something within us that becomes our gift to the world. Her latest book, Becoming Fierce, takes the reader through a compelling and dynamic journey to expand their personal power, purge what doesn't serve them, and design an authentic life that is deeply fulfilling. Igniting the Spark with Stephanie James is the worldwide weekly podcast that she created to have people live their best lives. And her guests are some of the most influential thought leaders and change makers on the planet in the fields of psychology, spirituality, science, and more. It's available on all podcast platforms. I'll have all of this in the show notes. And with profound wisdom and decades of research, Stephanie provides her audiences a North Star to guide them to solid shores, thrive through challenging times, cultivate strength and courage, and create substantial change in their lives. We are so thrilled to have Stephanie here today, so please welcome Stephanie James.
Hi, Jocelyn. So excited to be here with you.
You too. I know we have a very dear mutual friend, and anytime Jen Hill tells me to meet somebody, I have to immediately stop everything and do it because she has never steered me wrong. So I'm thrilled to get to know you today.
Yeah, same here. I just when Jen got that spark, she said, "Oh my gosh, I gotta connect you too." So I was thrilled about this meeting today.
And as I was reading your bio, it was like a lifetime in a few paragraphs. I thought, oh my God, she has so many things similar with my background. And I thought this will be a very interesting conversation. So why don't you tell people a little bit about how you wound up doing everything you do, but really like your journey to this point? That's kind of a mouthful, right? In 35 seconds,
Yeah,
no, just go ahead. Take your time.
um,
Yes.
no, I think it's been interesting, like all of us. It's not ever a straight line. Our journey is just this winding path, and sometimes it goes through the dark woods, and sometimes it's in these beautiful illuminated meadows. But for sure, when I share my actual story of kind of how I got here, I have to rewind all the way back. It started because I think it started from I had this beautiful kind of golden childhood for 13 years. And I had this loving, amazing family, lots of family vacations, lots of family around all the time. Both my parents came from farms in Nebraska and Timnath. So that was just a part of my childhood and being in nature. And I was absolutely 100% a daddy's girl. I was the little girl that followed my dad everywhere. I was his shadow. If he was raking leaves in the yard, I was holding the bag for them. If he was working in his workshop, he had a little board set up with nails in it so I could sit there and be beside him. And that's important because this whole beautiful childhood in an evening, in one night, was completely shattered and irreversibly broken. My parents never fought in front of us. We had no idea anything was going on behind the scenes. And at 13 years old, my 10-year-old brother and I wake up to the sound of screeching tires. in the driveway. And we look out the window and my mom's pulling down the driveway and my dad's jumping on the hood of the car, like beating the windshield for her to, get out of the car. And we're like, oh my gosh, what is happening? Well, my father had been having an affair and had told my mother that night after everyone went to sleep, he was leaving her. And it was, I can't even begin to tell you the shattering that took place after that. And being a daddy's girl, I went with my dad. I mean, that was just natural for me. Fast forward 6 months later, I have a new stepmother who makes it very clear that I'm considered the other woman. And so from that point on, I'm not allowed to speak to my father alone or be with my father alone. And to the day he died, I wasn't allowed to speak to him alone on the phone. Mm. And, without getting into the story too deep, at 16, when I came back to stay with my mom and my father and stepmother were moving to Austin, they came to the driveway and honked the horn for me to come out of the house. And they said, hey, we're moving to Austin. You need to decide if you want to come or not. I'd grown up in Fort Collins, Colorado. I'd gone to preschool academy with my little friends since, I was 4 years old, and I was about to be a junior in high school. And I'm like, I'm going to stay. And this story is important because what happened at that point is that my father stopped speaking to me. I didn't hear from them again for a year. And so, Josselyne, I went into this like absolute, probably for the next 15 years of like feeling very, very unlovable. I was, even though I had beautiful experiences and had children and got married and did all this stuff, I had this underlying sadness inside of me and this feeling like I had to earn love. Mm. I felt like I had to look the right way and do the right things and get not just one degree, but get a graduate degree. And it was all trying to earn this love back. And so there was this one incredible moment at a little after I turned 30, in my early 30s, which is actually in my film, When Sparks Ignite, we talk about this. But it was a life changer. It was a game changer. And I had gone to a healing school in San Francisco. And it was a Sufi school where you learn to be just a clearer conduit for healing to come through you. And so, I'd already gone to graduate school. I was a psychotherapist. I'd done all this wonderful work, yet this was what was to be, again, the game changer. Dr. Jaffe, who was presenter, as I walk in, shakes my hand, and it's like he is looking into my soul. And like he's holding my hand just a little bit too long. and interestingly, later, like he's about, I don't know, a third through his conversation up on stage, and he looks into the audience and he says, hey, you in the blue coat, I've got a message for you. And I look around and I look around. I'm like, oh crap, I'm the one in the blue coat. And he says this message for me and I can't hear him. Mm. And he says it again and I still can't hear him. And the third time he says it, all the air conditioning units in the place come on and nobody can hear him. So then people are laughing, and he's like, come up here, my dear, come here. And I go up by the stage and he says, the message that I'm trying to tell you that you are so resistant to is stop trying. Stop trying. And I don't know how he knew, but he literally said, you've been trying to be perfect your whole life for your father, and now you're trying to do it for your husband. Stop trying. And Josselyne, the awareness for me was, oh my God, I have tried my whole life to earn it outside of me. And that love and this true experience of acceptance is an inside job, but I couldn't get it outside of me.
Well, that's
and from that day, oh my gosh. So sorry for the really long story, but that's really what started this larger journey, into not only how do I cultivate a true friendship and loving myself, it's also how can I help bring that gift then to others? And I think that that's what all my mediums have been about, whether it's film or my podcast or the books, my private practice retreats, whatever it is, it's literally around your period healing, period matters, period. Because as we do that, then we're like, the pebble in the pond and the concentric circles of healing and love and, whatever it is that we continue as we clear out this conduit that is us, we can help bring that divine self through.
So you go, so goes the universe, as I usually say. But people don't
Love that.
realize they have that kind of impact. They see the impact other things have on them or other people have on them, but to see that, Sir James Jean used to say, if you held up a finger and curled it, as I curled my finger, the entire universe moves. And I like to think of each of us as the finger. And as we go, so, we go down a dark road, so does everything. We go up and out, so does everything. So the responsibility, not like a burden, but the opportunity that people have to have an impact in the world, you're already having an impact. The question is, what kind of impact do you want to have?
Exactly. Exactly. And I loved it. Our mutual friend we just spoke about, Jen Hell, she was talking about how, it's even our thoughts. When we think of our thoughts, she said it's like putting sesame seeds on a scale. Like we're going to
Mm,
put something towards good or we're going to put something towards darkness. And we want to have more sesame seeds on that end of the scale that we can really create a tipping point for ourselves. And I
yes.
love that analogy. I've used that so many times since she spoke that wisdom. And to know, as you know, Jocelyn, that it's a continued journey, that there's no place of arrival,
No.
which I think can be, such a myth like, oh, I'm so aware, or I'm so enlightened now. And yet, guess what? The light, life and the universe is going to continue to give you opportunities to grow and heal and excavate whatever is unhealed within you. And I love when you say that, it's an opportunity, right? It's an opportunity towards expansion and an opportunity to help bring that light that is us through to the world.
Yeah. And it isn't about never failing, because failing is, if you're not failing, you're not up to anything big enough. Because ultimately, if you're winning every game you're playing, it's like playing tennis with a 5-year-old, not exactly a big challenge. So I always look to what's the next thing I can fail at so I can learn and grow. So when you say there's no like place to reach, I always think of it as like a mountain with no top. So people better get into the climb, because there is no top to this one, if you're really committed to mastery. That's definitely, I think we have that in common. So tell us a little bit about some difficult this is called Be Unmessable With. So the question I ask every
Yeah.
guest is a situation that you dealt with that was super difficult, that, I mean, obviously the divorce of your parents was super difficult. And that may be the situation that comes to mind, but I'm guessing if you're as successful as you are, you've hit other obstacles along the way, as we all have. So a situation where the circumstances that were coming at you could have messed with you to the point of taking you out of whatever game that was, but you were able to draw upon something and transcend those circumstances and really emerge what I call being unmessable with.
Yeah, thank you. I love that so much. Um, because it has been just 7 years ago. Literally, I always say life begins at 50, and 7 years ago was when I turned 50.
Oh, me too. We're the
And
same age.
woo, I love that. I love
Yes.
that.
Well, my
I mean,
birthday
I
is
love
in a
every,
little bit. So yes, but by the
okay,
time
okay,
this
I'm a
airs,
little
I
bit
will be
older.
57.
Well, so I do, this was between 40 and 50, I had 10 years of true heartache and struggle with my daughter's addiction.
Mm,
So I have a gorgeous, beautiful, talented daughter, Acacia, who, she was a straight A student all the way through high school, star soccer player, lead in the school play, sang for, the sweet little band in high school when she was a senior. I mean, she was just one of the lights of my life for sure. And we were so close. I mean, she was the kid who, like, everybody would go to bed and she and I would sit at the breakfast bar still and just talk, her senior year. I'll never forget those times. Well, the next year when she went to school, she her boyfriend was a year older than her. So he'd already been at CSU here in Fort Collins for a year. When she got here, he was already doing Oxycontin. He was already, doing acid and all kinds of drugs. And sweet little Acacia, man, she was just hooked. Oxycontin and oxycodone, that was it. And it was heartbreaking. Um, and that journey continued. I mean, it was so tough. And I will tell you a couple moments that literally brought me to my knees. One was after she had gotten engaged and had this gorgeous engagement at one point in Maui with her then boyfriend of a couple years. His parents, everybody was there. It was this beautiful engagement at sunset. A month later, she was pregnant. And 15 months after that, she had her second son. So I had no idea that she was still using during that time. So also her fiance was using, and it had gotten really serious. And fast forward, by the time I found out what was going on, it was a phone call I had received from her fiance, and he said, I did heroin last night. I'm freaking out right now. I tried to do pot to come down, but I need you to come get me and take me to the hospital. And I went and got him. We had 4 hours in the emergency room. I'm just holding this kid's hand as he's going into convulsions. They were giving him Ativan and things to calm down as he's withdrawing. And I couldn't get a hold of my daughter, and I couldn't get a hold of my daughter. And finally, she shows up at the hospital 4 hours later, and she sees him, and they're both crying. And he says, tell her. And I'm like, what? And she said, I've been doing it too. And I'm telling you, Josselyne, I hit my knees. I couldn't stand in that moment. I just sobbed and sobbed. And I said, okay, we got to get everybody into treatment, and did. We sent him back actually to his parents in Seattle. Unfortunately, they did not support him, and he ended up being homeless, has been homeless since. Did not ever contact my daughter or his two sons again. My daughter struggled, although she got off heroin. The next 2 years, she was a horrific alcoholic. And I mean, here's, the light, like one of the lights of my life, and someone I adore, and she's lying to me, and she's stealing from me and my parents and doing things that you go, oh my God, this isn't my daughter.
Yes, I have that personal experience that I can relate to with one of my children and rehab. And my husband is 34 years sober. So I get it. There's nothing worse than seeing your child and not knowing what to do. Like, you can't really do anything. Because ultimately it's the disease that has a grip, and the disease has a lot of muscle until it doesn't, until their word has more muscle than the disease.
Exactly. Because in and out of so many different centers, to try to recover.
Yeah, it's brutal.
And she wasn't ready. And finally, one night, and I have to say, Josselyne, I mean, you want to talk about difficult, this whole situation became the end of my marriage. Because I'd only been married at this time. I had remarried. I was married only a little over a year. And this particular gentleman, when all of this was going down, had said, and I have to put this in because he was a multimillionaire, and he literally said, I'm not going to give you a penny for her recovery because there's no guarantee for return on my investment. And I'm faced with like, oh my gosh, my daughter, I knew this day that she was drunk. She had skipped out on work. She'd been drinking all day. And I just showed up at the house. And she answered the door, and I said, Acacia, I know you've been drinking. And she said, no, I haven't. Well, I had a receipt. I had actually the printout from her bank account that she shared with my mother. And I said, well, this morning you spent $74 on it. And she just hung her head and she said, okay. you're right. And I said, I'm here to take you to the hospital. And she said, I want to go. And that was the beginning. And
Yeah.
she spent the next 3 months in a treatment center, the Rose House, which I will always give kudos to because it was the game changer. I took her then 3 and 4 year old boys to raise while she was in treatment. And then she came and lived with us for a month. But it was during that first week when I had the boys. I'm working full time and now managing these poor two little guys who are they just come out of chaos. So they're just undone, you know. And it was this one night, Jocelyn, I'm putting them in bed and I'm so exhausted at the end of this night. My husband at the time is at a conference. You know, he's dancing and drinking and, you know, partying this night. I remember because he didn't call me that night. And I'm just like beyond myself. And I've got my head on the nightstand and I'm just rubbing these two little boys' backs. They were in these little twin beds. So I'm in between them, just like, dear God, please, please let them settle. Please let them settle. And again, I go into my bedroom and I find myself, I mean, there's been just a few times in my life I've been on my knees, but again, this was one of those times. And I'm just sobbing and I'm like, I can't do this anymore. You know, I'm just like, okay, divine, like, I can't fix anything. I can't make anything happen. Like, I literally, like, I'm so pissed because I didn't want any of this.
Yes.
You know, my marriage is in turmoil now. I don't know how to properly take care of these little boys. You know, I'm like, I am so overwhelmed. And then it's giving me the chills like crazy from head to toe because what came through was just the word surrender.
Mm.
Surrender, surrender, surrender. And it was like, I knew like my will couldn't do anything anymore. And it was just this total acceptance of like, this is how it is in this moment. This is what's happening. It's going to be okay. I have to just stay in this moment, surrender to this moment. And I'm telling you, I woke up the next morning, I slept so deep for the first time in forever. And it was so interesting how life started to change after that. You know, not only did we make it through, and my daughter now is going on, you know, this October will be 7 years clean and sober.
Congratulations. Just beautiful.
Oh my gosh, she is such a rock star. She just graduated with her art education degree from CSU. She went back after all these years being a non-traditional age student. She's a phenomenal artist. 4 years ago, got married. She never got married. So she got married to this wonderful man. They have an incredible life. And it's so awesome to see her thrive. And not only did she thrive through that, but through surrendering all the things that I've ever kind of hoped as an extra part of who I am, expression and I am, started to come through. Shortly after that, I'm sitting in my therapy office and I have the door cracked open to the waiting room. And I'm just sitting there going, how did I get back into radio? Because I had been a guest on a local radio show a few times. And I swear to God, I mean, it wasn't 3 minutes after I was thinking that there was a knock on the door and this gentleman came in and he said, hey, you know, my girlfriend's one of your clients, so I heard about you. And he said, I work for the local radio station.
Of course.
And he said, yeah, yeah. And he goes, and I'm just wondering if you'd be interested in having your own show.
I love it. I love stories. It's abracadabra, which is my tattoo, which means you create with
that.
your word. You know, that's what abracadabra actually means. It's not magical, but it is magical. You create as you speak. So there you go. Surrender. And there's space for things like that to come into your life.
Exactly. I mean, exactly. And like Michael Singer, you know, one of my favorite expressions or quotes of his is suffering is when we want this moment to be anything other than what it is. And that's the truth. I mean, what a guiding mantra in my life after that. And it was literally after that, things just kept opening up and opening up. And from the people I'd met on the podcast that became dear friends, then the film emerged, literally a download after a meditation. And I'm like, I know some of the most brilliant minds and serving hearts on the planet. I need to bring them together for this event where it's not like other events where they go and present for 45 minutes and don't speak to one another, but like we come together ahead of time and have our own experience. And then through that alchemy, bring that to the live audience. And oh my gosh, I mean, and I have to tell you, I was just divorced at that time. And I probably had 67 cents in my savings account. You know, how could I pull
The
off this
year we were
film?
born, Stephanie. That was lucky.
Yes,
67. There you go.
you have it. You have it. Because I mean, literally, these people emerged. You know, Larry Dossey and Jacob Lieberman and George and Sabina Capanelli. I mean, there was 12 of us that ended up in this film. These beautiful thought leaders from all over, and they did it out of the kindness of their heart. They would hear about it and say, "I want to be a part of this." And so, and you know, the Capanellis were like, "Let us introduce you to our award-winning film crew." And I mean, everything just was serendipitous. And that literally, that's what's happened since. Since I turned 50, I have had to keep miracle journals
Mm,
because I don't want to miss these incredible things that keep showing up. And again, not that it's easy, there's still challenges. And there's a continued invitation to surrender. But my life has never been the same. I mean, and I really think and believe that that is what gave me that inner fortitude to say, just like you're saying, I'm unmessable.
that's
That it's
great.
wide open now.
That's just beautiful. I love that story. And what would you say to people that are listening? Like, what's one thing they could do today or they could start doing today that would set them up on that kind of miracle path, be a space for miracles?
I think the very first thing to do is to stop, to pause. And we're so conditioned to do more and be more. And I have definitely been guilty of that and continue to learn that lesson about how to pull back. The first thing, if they pause and let go of the distractions, let go of the internet and let go of all the social media for a moment and come back to our own hearts, I think that's where it begins. You know, the simple act of heart math, if people are familiar with that, it takes 2 minutes at the most to drop out of your head and into your heart. So literally, people that are listening right now, you know, if they would just take that moment and put their hands on their hearts and just bring your attention for a moment just into your heart, feel the heat from the palm of your hand on your chest. Feel yourself just taking that next breath, the inhale and the exhale. Notice what that feels like in your body and just keep dropping down into your heart. And then just for a moment, bring to your heart something that you're truly grateful for. And it can be the smallest of things. It could be literally this morning, I was so thankful that it was cool here. We've
I
been having
bet.
such hot weather. And so just to wake up and open the window and to have that cool temperature. And it might just be you're thankful to be alive. It doesn't have to be something huge. I am thankful that I have two beautiful dogs that I share my home with, you know, whatever that is. So you drop into that and marinate for just a moment. As you do that simple practice, that took us less than, 2 minutes right now. And I don't know how you feel, Josselyne, but I already feel like just like I've done a huge exhale.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's a beautiful practice, and that's something every single person listening could do, not only along with us or right after this or tomorrow morning or every morning, to really get yourself in that space of space. That's really what it is. It's a space of space where you can start to manifest what you really, really want.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I would add to that, it's not about, having to always be happy or always be in joy, because this moment is not always going to be a joyful one. And I'll never forget when I used to work for the school district, I had this little fourth grade girl. When I walked into the classroom, I was teaching character building and I came in and she's like, "Oh, Miss Stephanie, you're always happy." And I really stopped her and I said, "Sweetheart, you know what? Miss Stephanie isn't always happy. sometimes I'm really sad and sometimes I get really angry. And I really wanted her to hear that there were other states of being and it wasn't just about being happy. Because I think, Jocelyn, that's the other piece if people want to start this journey. It's being open and holding whatever shows up inside of us, wherever we find ourselves, even if it feels uncomfortable. If you just go into the feeling for a moment, the emotion, you'll notice it's somewhere in your body. It might be felt as a constriction or an ache in the gut or the solar plexus, the heart, the throat. Just notice and breathe into it without telling the story. It's like erasing the equal signs that this experience has to equal something or say something about me. It doesn't. So when we learn to start cultivating this relationship with ourselves, it's like, oh, I'm just going to hold what's here. Oh, right now I'm struggling. What does that feel like in me? Okay. Or right now I feel abundantly joyful. What does that expansion feel like in me? And so I think it really is, there's this piece for all of us that's this journey of truly befriending ourselves. And it's not just saying, oh, just love yourself, be your own best friend. It's not that simple, but it is cultivating that muscle by showing up for ourselves over and over and over that we begin to deepen in that relationship. And I think that is part of what opens up these doorways for us.
Well, I can hear the growth from the time where you were imprisoned by perfection to what you're expressing now is a different universe. So I can acknowledge the transformation that you've gone through in your years, and it's a delightful place to be where you are now, I would say.
It is so much more peaceful. And, I have to share with you, Jocelyn, too, that just recently, I mean, I am talking like just a few days ago, I have been doing work with this incredible kinesiologist out of Australia and became clear of an unconscious block that I had. And I was like, oh, there's a part of me still. Wow, this little, again, that little wounded girl. And it was even before that, it was even at the age of 7, realizing that when I moved to Corvallis, Oregon from Fort Collins, the girls weren't wearing their socks the way that I did. I came from this cold climate and I wore them to my knees. And this girl, the first day of school, was like, why are you wearing your socks like that? And then literally said to me, and why is your nose so long? And I remember at 7 going, oh my God, something's wrong with me.
Yeah.
Like I internalized that. And without going to this deeper work, this unconscious work, I've got in touch with that part of me that has still been driven to like, I've got to do more, I've got to be more, I've got to be successful, I've got to prove something. Even though I've cultivated a loving relationship, it's like, oh, interesting. What I was perceiving as being driven, there's also an internal pressure there. And once I realized that just a few days ago, I said, you know what? I am backing off of these 10 to 12-hour days that I'm working. I literally resigned from a nonprofit platform I've been working with where I was doing extra interviews and master classes and all these different programs and said, I'm not going to be able to do that anymore. Like I'm done with that piece. I'll fulfill my commitment. I'm hosting something for them, a big gala event, but I'm like, I'll still do that, but I can't continue to put that out there. And that was so huge for me. It's like, I don't want to, I don't have anything to prove. I don't
Well,
have anything to prove.
it's interesting because I have a whole episode that probably will have aired by the time your episode airs, but it's about being driven or being given. And which one is the space that you're in? Are you being driven by some conversation from when you were 7 that you weren't good enough and you got to prove something, or, be perfect to get approval from your dad, or, whatever it is, comparing yourself to others? Or are you being given by a purpose, by a vision, by a dream that you have that pulls you forth? It's a different physical experience to be driven versus being given. And when you're driven, what's predictable in the executives and CEOs that I've worked with is burnout. No question, 99.9% of those founders, executives, CEOs end up burnt out. Even though they're super successful and they're working like crazy, they become imprisoned by their own creation because it's coming from a space of being driven. So I hear that in what you're saying, and those 12-hour days and all of that. So freedom can never happen from that space of being driven. It can only happen from that space of being given. And that's what I can hear you grappling with and sort of ending up on the other side of as of this recent breakthrough.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. And I think I was moving towards balance, but you are absolutely hitting it. There is a shift of energy. And again, I know when I'm there. I mean, I woke up Saturday morning in total peace and lit in my beingness, And so I was just like, this is now the next, I think we have several incarnations within
Yes.
this incarnation. And so I'm thrilled at this next place. And I just invite people also to check out exactly what you're saying, that subtlety of energy. I love that term, am I being driven or am I being given? Because so many of us, and I'm feeling too, like you, it's like we're doing what we do because there's a calling. There's this inner just like it is beautiful and it is given. And so to really pay attention to and to be attuned to those other subtleties that are like, I have to, I must, I should. I always say
Or
those
I
are like all,
can't.
yeah.
All of those are prisons. And, the work that I do is all about shifting from the world of reaction to the world of creation. And in that world of reaction are those things like I should, I shouldn't, I can't, you know, don't know how, or I don't have it in me, or this is too much, or all of that whole world, as opposed to that space of creation. And what are you creating and fulfilling on? That is your creation. That isn't the creation from a 7-year-old's decision, which is so easy to get lost in that blind spot. But once you see it, you can't unsee it. So that's what's so great is now that you've seen that, there's no turning back. It's all just now what? There's no going
absolutely.
back to that. You've opened that prison door.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And that again, we continue to evolve. So even though I had the original lesson 27 years ago, it's continued at more subtle and subtle levels. And I think one of the things too is when we do those moments where we surrender to the flow, which I have had a ton of those in the last 30 years, that is where miracles show up. That was the meditation where the download came through. That was, the pause and dropping to my knees. That's
Yeah.
when that inspiration came through. And I'll share with you, Josselyne, I think one of the biggest things that has happened in my life happened, just about 4 months ago. I was interviewing Neil Donald Walsh on my podcast. And for people that don't know, he's the one that wrote Conversations with God. So like 5 million copies published in 37 different languages. And he's, that book way back in the 90s was one of those ones for me that was very transformational. And so he and I get on the show and we don't even get to the interview. Like we're just talking. We were just having this heart to heart connection for like 30 minutes. We could not get to the interview. And at one point I watched him have a download. And I'm so thankful to have this on video. I'm not sharing this video, but I have this video. And he says to me, Stephanie, you're going to write your next book and you're going to start tomorrow morning. And the title of this book is I'm Dying to Tell You About Death. And it's going to have a global impact. And I'm going to endorse the book. And it was the most incredible, and you know how this feels. I know it, Josselyne, like when you get that call and you're like, okay, like
That's
here
it.
we are.
Yep.
And I woke up the next morning and started. My first 2 books each took 9 months apiece to write. This book was downloaded and done a little under 6 weeks.
Amazing.
And the people that came out of the woodwork, it's my own life story and also these incredible interviews, the people that came out of the woodwork to be a part of this book, like Ariel Ford, Wayne Dyer's daughter Sage and his wife Marceline, Stephen Simon, who is the Academy Award winning film producer of What Dreams May Come with Robin Williams and Cuba Gooding Jr. And I mean, and so many more, just beautiful people just contributing. And it was like nothing I've ever experienced. So, so exciting to have that just again, as we trust and we surrender to that flow and that divine calling, then these other things do fall away. You know, those other things aren't important, and we're able to just align with that divine calling.
Yes, I love it. And by the time this airs, I think that book should be just coming out. Yes?
I hope so, right? At this exact moment of this recording, my incredible literary agent, who also just dropped into my lap serendipitously, by a friend of mine who is a really renowned author. And as we spoke about this, she's also super psychic. And she's like, Stephanie, this isn't just going to be an Amazon bestseller. This is going to be a New York Times bestseller. So I better introduce you to my literary agent. And so the next day I met Lisa Hagen, signed the contract that day. And as of today, Tarcher, which is Random House Penguin, Monkfish, Hampton Roads, and Sounds True are all interested in the book. So we'll see what happens. We'll see
Beautiful.
how this blooms in the world. And again, that's all been about surrender. After I wrote it and after it was pitched and these people were interested, I just said, you know, I truly trust the universe that wherever it's meant to be, it's going to be. I have zero ego. I have zero. And when I say ego, it's never the big me ego, like I'm incredible. It's the little me ego that doesn't feel enough. But she's let go of this completely, just knowing like if it's going to serve who it's supposed to serve. That's the reason it was
Well,
written. And I
trust
can
the
just let
universe and
go.
trust your agent. That's what I would say.
You good things to trust. Two very good things
That's
to trust.
right. And what is it that you wanted to offer our listeners? I know we talked about you giving a gift, a generous gift. What is it that you want to tell them about?
Yes, yes. Well, I am so thrilled to offer people a free PDF of my first book, The Spark Igniting Your Best Life. And you can get that on my website if you go to stephaniejames.world. All you have to do is sign in. There's a place right in the beginning of the website, and that PDF will be in your inbox. So I just wanted to share that first book because it's that very first igniting the sparks, and then Becoming Fierce, the next book expands that, and now, wow, I'm dying to tell you about death is a whole new realm and expansion. So just excited to share that with your listeners.
And we'll definitely have a link to your website in the show notes so that people can just click easily and not have to remember or write anything down. But I so appreciate you taking the time to be on the show. And I know as a podcast host, it must be nice to be interviewed for a change as opposed to doing the interviewing. What is
It's
that like for
fun. It is
you?
so fun.
Yeah.
Oh, it's such a joy. I love it. And I'd love to have you on my podcast.
Game
That would
on.
be awesome.
Game
I love
on.
it.
Yes. Well, quid pro
Love it.
quo, Clarice. No, well, we can continue this fun conversation. And, really, for those of you listening, if you got value out of something that was said today or got inspired, which I can't, you'd have to be dead or a rock not to have gotten value or been inspired in this conversation. Please share this episode with someone that you think would gain that kind of spark that Stephanie talks about and be able to be supported through some difficult circumstance that they're dealing with and someplace where they need to surrender in order to bring in the kind of flow that they're really committed to but blocked with. This is something to share with people. And of course, rate or review the episode if this is something that calls to you as well. And we will see you on the next episode of Be Unmessable With, the podcast. Thanks for joining me in this episode of Be Unmessable with the podcast. And as you know, I always like to make sure that you got value out of being with me. So I am offering you an additional free gift, which is how to have an unmessable with day. I have put together a checklist of 5 daily practices that you can begin to exercise the muscle of being unmessable with if you do these 5 things every day. So click in the show notes and make sure you download this free checklist of the basics of being unmessable with 5 daily practices. We'll see you on the next episode. And please, if you can take a moment and just rate and review the episode, it makes a huge difference on all the podcast platforms. So if you could do that, I would deeply appreciate it. All right. See you on the next one.